everyone. This is our presentation on Gothic architecture. First, we can talk about the historical context. What is Gothic architecture? Gothic architecture is a design style that was created during the mid-20th century to the 16th century in Europe. It is primarily made up of ornamental exterior and interior with thin walls. It is most known for its glass windows, its webbed vaults. Most of the buildings use cathedrals or churches. Gothic is a prerogative term that refers to medieval architecture, coined by Renaissance architect scholars. It also refers to German tribes in Bavaria. These related to what happens in history and invasions that I say later. How it came to be. Gothic architecture, the order of events that happened was like the fall of the Roman Empire, the development of theological ideas, and then came the architectural typologies from the universities, and then it just kind of fell through there, where the translations came from it, and the development of distinctional structural elements that followed, and that became the Gothic style. The fall of the Roman Empire happened when the Roman Empire turned to Christian, and it was legal. After that, most of the stability fell apart because the military was not listening to any of the leaders. It actually ended up hiring barbarian mercenaries to take other lands and basically overturn the empire. From there, they started to develop the university theological ideas, and this historical concept was known as syncretism. It's basically a way to understand theological ideas, and this formed a lot of the structure of universities, which then formed a lot of Gothic architecture ideas and enlightenments. Then we have about Schubert, who created the Gothic vocabulary and what is Gothic architecture. He made a manifesto that helped this, and then it also formed into High Gothic architecture, or known as Fremont Gothic architecture style. It was most famous for its rose windows, and it also was famous for its dematerialization theology, which is basically just thin walls and large windows to let in light. Gothic architecture is very important because it created a new era of theological and enlightenment ideas about architecture and culture. It also created a lot of the first universities. As you can see on this side, there's the University of Cambridge, which is one of the first universities. It also created a lot of the...
There are a few characteristics that define Gothic architecture. These four key elements of Gothic architecture, which are pointed arches, flying buttresses, ribbed vaults, and rose windows. Abbot Suger, who is known as the father of Gothic architecture, used all of these elements as a way to get people to focus on light and how it can affect the space as well as the people who enter it. One way that was used to bring light into spaces was the use of ornate circular windows known as rose windows, which would allow light and color into Gothic-style buildings. These rose windows were typically very detailed and used many different colors of glass. These were even used to create art that could tell the biblical narrative through pictures. Pointed arches, also known as ogival arches, were created with two circular arches intersecting, creating a point at the top of the intersection. You can see the use of ogival arches in the facade of the Ames Cathedral and Ames Expanse. The arches were used to create a sense of height and monumentalism. These arches were also used in conjunction with the rose window to create a theme such as in the Reims Cathedral in France. This specific example depicts the narrative of the Last Judgment. The next element in Gothic architecture is flying buttresses. According to our class's architectural glossary, flying buttresses are a type of buttress that transmits and the thrust to the heavy abutment by the half arch. The buttress is a vertical element, and the flyer is the floating element that attaches the buttress to the wall of the building. This element was used to support walls that were thinner and taller than what was used during the Romanesque period, but they were also used to create a sense of lightness that Suger sought in Gothic architecture. Ribbed vaulting is the next element. Ribbed vaults were created when two pointed arches intersect. These vaults were able to distribute loads more effectively, and like the flying buttresses, were made possible to thinner and taller walls. Along with this, they were used to create elaborate designs on ceilings of Gothic cathedrals.
Technology. Some of the technologies, such as the pointed arch, help distribute the weight. Pointed arches direct the weight from the building downwards, which allows for thinner and higher walls, alongside reducing the stress. Pointed arches relieve some of the stresses on the other structural elements, allowing it for the smaller columns or spines. Rib vaults is an technology as well, reinvented for the Gothic architecture. Rib vaults are constructed by first building the ribs, then building a thin web of vaults in which the panels defined by the ribs. The contour of the ribs determine the shape of the web. It also helps weight distribution. Rib vaults distribute the weight out of the ceiling downwards and outwards, throws the ribs to support areas like the piers or columns. This allows for thinner walls and higher ceilings, which it can accommodate for more windows. The flying buttresses is also a technology. A flying buttress is made up of two parts of a large masonry block called the buttress and a sloping beam called the flyer. Its function: the flyer leans against the wall and transfers the weights to its support to the pier. This allows the wall lighter, which frees up the space for, as I said before, windows and other decorations. Alongside, the buttress is often topped with a pencil or statue to add weight and stability. The gap between the pier and the wall makes the support system appear to be flying. Flying buttresses oriented in a late antique, but they were more elegant and supportive during the Gothic period. Became defining features of the Gothic architecture and are often used in churches. Some of the physics alongside the way of the flying buttress redirects a building's weight is similar to how lightning rods redirect electricity towards the ground.
Okay, so now we have the famous buildings. The first one is the Basilica Cathedral of Saint Denis in Saint Denis, France. So this was first it started as a Carolingian church, and Abbot Siger remodeled it into its Gothic traits. So it was the church, and then he inputted his traits that he developed, and it served as the prototypical Gothic church. And it was the precedent for universities and monasteries and cathedrals. So it was basically what influenced the other architecture buildings or churches. The next one is Notre Dame de Paris in Paris, France. So this was a Roman temple. It was constructed in 1160, and it's ever since it's been used as an iconic cathedral to the country of France. It was also a Carolingian church, and it went through several phases, and it went through a lot since it was made in 1160. You can see it was a symbol of the French style, which is also a name for the Gothic style because of everything taking place in France. The next picture, you could see the spire that makes it unique, and also the rose window on the side. The next cathedral is Notre Dame de Reims in Reims, France. So this is another example of a Carolingian church, again in France, and it's inspired by Saint Denis, which was used as the precedent for it. And the key element for this church is that the rose window that you see in the west facade, it's 40 feet in diameter. So from left to right, it's 40 feet. So it's a huge rose window. So what states out is the size, scale, and in 1027, King Henry I of France was crowned here, so it became the royal cathedral at the time. The next church is Notre Dame de Amiens. This church is the largest church in France. It influenced the Gothic architecture, and it's known for its high Gothic traits, attention to detail, and its size. So you could see from the picture just how huge it is and all the little details that go to it. It was completed in less than 100 years, which is something that was never done before. Usually they would take more than 400 to 500 years, 600 years maybe. And so it was made because of the guild, more like a union that was present in the time. So it's really an iconic building. And it also served as an example of the Renaissance style, which is letting in more light into the building. This next building, now we're in Italy, we're not in France anymore. So this church is the Cathedral de Milano in Milan, Italy. It's the largest in Italy, third in Europe, and fifth in the world. You can see from its size and all the details that it has. This one, how I stated before, they take a while to make. This one took 600 years to complete, and you could see that it has a little bit of mix of every different style since it took 600 years, so it kept developing and developing. So you can see its different features. You can see the Romanesque style and Gothic style, and etc. Saint Chapel is the example that I added into the Renaissance style. So this is where you could see all the windows are, well, it's mostly all stained glass, meaning Renaissance style, that it lets in more light, the thinning of walls. And this is also located in Paris, France. And it's the dematerialization of the wall, so it's thinning and minimizing the material.
There was many famous figures that shaped the Gothic era. First, we have Abbat Shuga, considered to be the father of Gothic architecture. He popularized the Gothic style after renovating the Basilica of Saint Denis in France, where he combined Romanesque and Gothic styles. He also pioneered the use of stained glass windows to fill the interior of buildings with vibrant light, and he introduced key elements of Gothic architecture, such as flying buttresses, ribbed vaults, and pointed arches. Then we have William of Sens. He was a French master mason and architect. He played a pivotal role in the reconstruction of the Canterbury Cathedral in England after the fire of 1174, and he introduced Gothic techniques to England, such as pointed arches and ribbed vaulting, influencing the development of the English Gothic style. Next we have Louis of France. He was the King of France and major patron of Gothic art and architecture. He promoted the use of Gothic architecture as a symbol of royal and divine authority. He also commissioned Saint Chapel in Paris, which he used the Renaissance Gothic style known for its stained glass windows. Then we have Pierre de Montreal. He was a French architect known for his work on prominent Gothic landmarks, including Notre Dame de Paris and the Saint Chapel. He refined Gothic ornamentation and structural design, contributing to the Renaissance Gothic style. And then finally, we have Robert de Luzarches. He was a French master architect. He was the lead architect of Amiens Cathedral, which at the time was the largest Gothic cathedral in the world. His design for the Amiens Cathedral influenced Gothic cathedrals in Europe that came after, and then he mastered the use of flying buttresses to support cathedrals' immense walls, allowing for large stained glass windows.
This is what our group has learned about Gothic architecture both through the slides in ARC 231 as well as through our references.